Many greetings to you from our home port of Sydney, Australia, where we are tied up and researching some of the most interesting tidbits on superstitions of the sea. We are your crew, Kate
and Renee. Climb aboard and find a comfy spot as we take another plunge into the silent world. This is going to get weird.
But make sure you step with your right foot first onto the boat, because apparently if you step onto it with your left foot, it brings a bit of bad luck.
Ooh, I'm going to be super conscious of that now. But no, seriously, just use whatever foot I think you feel is going to keep you in balance and prevent you from falling. You know that gap between the boat and the dock? That is, every time, that's a legitimate concern of mine every time I'm stepping onto a boat. So just use whichever foot is going to prevent you from falling or tripping onto the deck.
Oh, so we don't want any injuries on today's cruise because the paperwork is most tedious.
Mm-hmm. They say the purr of a cat has healing properties, and many of us are cat people or just love internet cats. But not all members of the feline species are viewed favourably. Cat history is patchy. Sometimes they're revered, other times viewed with suspicion and associated with evil. Such is the fate of our feline friends of the black variety, who are often associated with evil and its servants, such as witches and demons. A starting place of this association may be actually in Greek mythology, where the goddess Hera or Ira turned one of her servants into a black cat as punishment. Hecate, the goddess of witchcraft, then took this black cat on as an assistant, which is really cute.
Aww. Kitties with jobs.
Aww.
Poor kitties have a really hard time, even up to the present day, where they are least likely to get adopted if they are black. But did you know that as far as sailing superstitions go, cats, especially black cats, are considered good luck on a ship? An extract from the Northern Star newspaper, Lismore, New South Wales, in December 1924, tells us, "The luck of black cats is proverbial, but what is not well known is the reason why seamen are so overindulgent to them. This is to prevent their bringing ill luck to the ship by running away. During the war, black cats were at a premium. With so much extra tonnage afloat, there was not enough to go around. Sometimes a young midshipman would be sent ashore in search of one black cat, and a certain youth, sooner rather than return empty-handed, would instead dye white patches of a black and white stray with ink."
Well, that paints a picture.
It is generally accepted that the good luck of having a cat of any colour on board comes from the reality that having a predator around eliminates the rats that spoil the food and munch on the rigging. This means a healthy crew, a healthy and safe ship with fewer accidents, and a greater chance of unspoiled cargo, which of course equals more money. All good, all round. Including the cat that's round from having too many treats. So for black cats, these superstitions means that on one hand they were unwanted and seen as omens of bad luck, but on the other, they were one of the best and most valued crew members. Being a black seafaring cat sounds a bit confusing.
It really does. It really does. 1 minute, there's people chasing after you, calling your names. The other, there's people chasing after you because they want to recruit you to be on a ship.
Sounds like online dating.
Well, another confusing set of superstitions around shipboard luck is the notion that a woman on board was considered bad luck. But a figurehead on the bow of the ship in the shape of a naked woman was desirable, as a bare-breasted maiden would calm an angry sea. Now remember, crews of seagoing vessels were predominantly male until very recently. Take from that what you will. In addition, it was considered good luck to have a baby be born on board. So I'm not sure how one may achieve this without women on board.
They kind of can't make up their mind, can they?
No.
Is the cat good luck or bad luck? Is the woman good or bad luck?
It's all over the shop.
Or all over the ship? Some other undesirable persons on board were the clergy and the bodies of the deceased. Both were considered bringers of ill fortune, up to and including death. If a sailor died at sea, however, it was thought that their spirit would become one of the animals which was often seen as being helpful to sailors, such as a seagull, a dolphin, or an albatross. Therefore, in turn, it was extremely bad luck to kill one of these creatures. You may recall from one of our previous episodes the story of Pelorus Jack, the Risso's dolphin that was thought to be a guardian spirit of Maori mythology, and was used to guide ships through the treacherous waters between 1888 and 1912. And then someone on board a ship called the SS Penguin once took a shot at our beloved Jack. Thankfully they missed, but the curious thing is that that ship did eventually wreck in that area 5 years later. Coincidence?
These superstitions and many others were fairly common knowledge for sailors, and there are, of course, some regional variations. There are long lists of sailor behavior and experience that are thought to have an effect on their luck. Being on the ocean means surrendering oneself to elemental force so great that the only way to comprehend the odds of survival or loss is through seemingly illogical practices and beliefs.
A most intriguing ritual is described in an extract from an article that was printed in the Cessnock Eagle and the South Maitland Recorder, New South Wales, on October 10th, 1930. Take it away, Renee.
Why is he doing that? I inquired of the skipper of the small island schooner as I watched one of the boat's crews standing on the jib boom, flourishing a small tomahawk in the air. "Cutting the rain squall," the skipper replied seriously. Then he smiled tolerantly at my look of incredulity. We were steaming into a blue-black wall of cloud that had apparently come up from nowhere and lay threateningly over the blue tropic waters. The glass-like ocean was ruffled, and a light breeze blew through the rigging and flapped the canvas awning aft. The native forward was wildly brandishing his tomahawk with his right hand and making sweeping movements with his left. I watched the operation with interest while I listened to the skipper's explanation of his boat's crew's act. The Boka natives are as superstitious as any of the other Melanesians. Superstitions are regarded religiously by these Melanesians. They form a great part of their daily life and are rigorously observed. An axe pointed towards a rain cloud or water spout will, it is believed, cause it to empty its contents before reaching the individual who is working its destruction. A wave of the hand, accompanied by a low incantation, will divert the storm. Becalmed sailors summon a favourable wind by low whistling and by special tufts of dried grass attached to the rigging of the ship or canoe. I find the line where it says, "Superstitions are regarded religiously by these Melanesians," most interesting because we see this belief, this faith in what constitutes good omens and bad omens, good luck and bad luck across the board with sailors, not just in Melanesia, but the world over. And quite often in communities that once were pagan, but were later converted to a monotheistic belief system, we see a blending of superstitions and rituals where the practices of old and new faith become merged. Basically, it's people going, yep, I'll say this prayer, but I'll also make this sign or follow this ritual from the old days, just in case. The sea is a treacherous place, so it was best to just appease anyone and everyone who had the power to affect a person's safety.
Another common feature we see in the article is the rules and beliefs around whistling at sea. It is commonly thought that whistling, i.e. expelling wind from the mouth, got translated in the supernatural world of elemental power as a massive dangerous storm and gale force winds. However, as is described in the article, in the event that the ship is becalmed and drifting aimlessly on the sea, or just bobbing around in one spot, a bit like conditions of winter sailing in Sydney, which I'm calling the Bob Fest, whistling is considered acceptable because it will bring about a favourable wind to get the ship underway again.
Well, I'm going to try that next time we're frying in the sun on the deck of the boat, and the only breath of wind is coming from our mouth while we're complaining about having no wind. Our work at the Foundation often takes us to some of the most remote places of the Great Barrier Reef, Coral Sea, and Torres Strait. We research events and then go in search of the remains of vessels that are significant to the story of Australia in some way and our surrounding region. One of the stories and associated shipwreck remains we investigated was that of the loss of HMS Porpoise and the merchant vessel Cato. On board Porpoise was the famous British surveyor Captain Matthew Flinders, who also had a very faithful companion called Trim, and Trim was a cat. Yeah, we love Trim.
Did you know that Trim has a statue at the State Library of New South Wales?
Yes, it's behind Flinders on the windowsill. Yeah. It's at the Mitchell Library.
Yeah.
And he's also pictured sitting at Flinders' heel, the statue that's outside Euston Station in the UK.
Yes.
There's a massive statue of Flinders kneeling down and I think using a compass or something like that on a map. And just behind him at his heel is Trim, just patiently sitting there waiting.
See, clearly a sailor who knew the value of a good little black kitty companion.
That's right. I really must look up. I've got a little book called Trim because Flinders wrote an essay about Trim after he lost Trim in Mauritius, where he was being kept prisoner by the French. So he wrote this whole essay dedicated to Trim, and what a good kitty he was. Trim was actually wrecked with Flinders twice. He survived a wrecking event twice.
See, that's why he deserves a statue.
Exactly. And I think he was actually with Flinders in this event that we investigated, with HMS Porpoise being wrecked with Cato.
Oh.
So there you go. After mapping much of the coast of Australia, he was on a return journey to England to request a new vessel that would allow him to continue his work, because his old ship, HMS Investigator, was in very poor condition and simply unable to continue working.
Porpoise was in convoy with Cato and one other ship called Bridgewater. On the 17th of August, 1803, Porpoise struck an uncharted reef. The irony of a surveyor who charts reefs being wrecked on one. When Cato and Bridgewater saw this, they immediately took action and tacked away in order to avoid the same fate. Unfortunately, in the rushed effort to do so, they tacked towards each other. Whoops. Cato then took the decision to tack out of the way, which meant that although the collision with Bridgewater had been avoided, Cato, instead, was now on a good course to crash into the reef, which it did shortly after.
God.
Bridgewater had escaped destruction, and while the sailors of the other two vessels spilled onto the reef, trying as best they could to get everyone off the ships that were being pushed onto the reef over and over again by the sea, Bridgewater made a turn to come back, presumably in order to begin a rescue operation. However, shockingly, as the ship got closer, it appears that a decision was made by the captain that it was all too hard, and Bridgewater simply sailed away, leaving the crews of Cato and Porpoise stranded on a reef in the middle of the Coral Sea, miles from land and safety. So rude. Bridgewater continued their original journey and arrived safely at its destination in India. Some of the crew here jumped ship in open protest of the captain's action back at the reef. Some would say the universe requires balance, karma, so it is curious indeed that after having left their fellow sailors from the Cato and Porpoise to their fate in the middle of the ocean, on its very next voyage, Bridgewater, the captain, and all the crew vanished without a trace somewhere in the Indian Ocean. The takeaway message here is that one should not leave behind shipwrecked mates, as this makes for very bad luck indeed.
In one of our other expeditions, we had a most surreal experience of coming face to face with our chance to act in an effort to correct and or avoid bad luck. It is a story I vaguely recalled our founder and director John Mullen recounting to us over a meal on a much later expedition. So when we began our research on this episode, I dropped him a line regarding the details of it. So gather round, lean close, and listen to this tale of devilfish.
The story of the devilfish, it's one of the more fascinating things that's happened to me during all of our expeditions, actually. Really, really extraordinary. And I probably wouldn't actually believe it if somebody told me it, but I was there, I saw it, and so did a lot of other people. So we weren't imagining it. So what happened? We were actually looking for Matthew Flinders's wrecks, I think it was, on that expedition, Porpoise and the Cato. We're out on Wreck Reef, which is about 300 nautical miles off the Barrier Reef, out into the Pacific Ocean, Coral Sea, spectacular location. We had two boats with us, two vessels with quite a lot of people on both. We were probably 25, 30 people strong altogether, I would say. And we'd finished a day of diving. The sea was really calm. It was flat, a beautiful evening, and we'd mostly had showers, and we were just sort of coming up on the deck. We were having a beer or a drink, waiting for dinner, which we were going to go inside and have. And it was a perfect evening, still, sun going down. But before the sun had gone down, so it was getting towards dusk, but it wasn't dark, suddenly we saw this bright light on the horizon, really bright. And it was hard to tell whether it was on the horizon or whether it was sort of closer to us, but it was a bright sort of pulsing light, not in any way like a ship's light or anything like that, although that's initially what we thought it was. But it was puzzling because it didn't move, and it was this sort of orb of light. So one of us ran upstairs to check the radar, because we had a 100-mile radar on the boat, and there was nothing on the radar in any direction, and yet we could all see this. So I remember getting that sort of tingling feeling in the back of my spine. What is that? It's not on radar. We then, and by this stage, 10 of us had seen it, so it wasn't. We were all looking at it. We radioed the other boat, which was a few hundred meters away. I said, can you see that light? And they all said, yes, we can. We're looking at it as well. And it stayed there for, I can't remember how long now, not all that long. And then as quickly as it appeared, it disappeared. It just slowly sort of fizzled out. And so then we were thinking, well, it has to be something to do with a boat. We were 300 miles from land, so it wasn't land. There's nothing between Wreck Reef and the Barrier Reef, so it had to be something else. And to this day, we don't know what it was. I thought perhaps it was St. Elmo's fire, but that normally, which is a sort of electrostatic reaction, but it's normally in rigging and on a vessel, not out at sea. But the really fascinating thing was that one of our crew, Freddie Pacoa, who's a New Vanuatu dive instructor and fantastic expedition member, a lifelong friend, he was standing on deck, and I remember him grabbing my arm and saying, John, it's the devilfish. We must be careful. It's the devilfish. And I said, what's the devilfish, Freddie? And he said, it's a bad spirit. But sometimes when you're out fishing, if you see the devilfish, you have to immediately throw any fish that you've caught overboard as a gesture to the gods. Otherwise, something terrible will happen. And he really believed it. He wasn't pulling my leg. His hands were shaking, and he was absolutely terrified by this whole thing. So we said, "Oh, come on, Freddie, this is 21st century." And no. He was absolutely adamant. So, in as a courtesy to him, we did. We caught a fair bit of fish over the few days we had in the freezer, and he made us throw it all overboard, which we did. And even then, he was unsettled. But thousands of years of tradition, I guess, in the islands had steeped that in him, that belief in him, and there was no way he was shaking. We could shake him out of it. So to this day, I've never known what it was. I saw it. We all saw it. It wasn't a ship. It wasn't. And I don't think it could have been St. Elmo's fire. So what was it? I don't know. But there's an interesting postscript to the story, which was several years later, we were in the Solomon Islands, and Jackie and I went out in a small boat at night, actually, with some local Solomon Islanders. I can't even now remember what exactly we were doing, but we were out in a little boat on the reef, and somehow we came onto this subject. And they recounted exactly the same story of not that particular event, but of the devilfish, the bright light. You have to put fish back if you've caught it, and this was like 2,000 or 3,000 kilometers away from where we'd been. Well, certainly a couple of thousand kilometers away from where we'd been. So that tradition or that mythology clearly spreads right through the island. So I'm a practical sort of humanist, and I don't believe too much in anything supernatural or whatever, but I don't have an explanation for what we saw that day.
The devilfish certainly seems to be a superstition across this region. We have been unable to find anything specific, though. We did come across a few mentions of devilfish related to folklore from Wales in the UK and some indigenous folklore mentioning a devilfish in the Americas. However, we're not sure if these were related in any way to such tales told in the Pacific. But if you have a lead or know more, please do get in contact with us, and also check out the show notes.
We'd love to learn more. It's a little bit hard with the current situation around the pandemic to go around speaking to people and finding out information. We rely a lot on online sources, and sometimes they're not the most reliable when it comes to folklore, especially folklore that's been handed down the generations orally. So
not everything is digitized, let alone digitized and tagged properly to make it easily searchable.
Mm-hmm. And curiously, we actually came across mention of the devilfish again during our successful collaborative project to locate HMAS AE1. That's Australia's first submarine. This sub was lost for 104 years and was eventually located during a search we supported and in which we participated in December 2017. The submarine was located at a depth of hundreds of meters off the coast of the Duke of York Islands in Papua New Guinea. During the preceding research undertaken by Commander John Foster on the loss of AE1, the information from which is published in his book called AE1 Entombed but Not Forgotten. We'll put that in the show notes. He came across a story. This story was told to him by the locals of the islands, who had it handed down to them as an oral history, where their predecessors had spotted the devilfish approaching their shelter sea cave. This devilfish then stopped, reversed, and then disappeared below the waters, and it was around the date and vicinity of A1's loss. It is probable that they had seen A1 struggling to the surface and then remaining there for a bit before sinking beneath the waves with all hands, not to be seen again until over a century later.
As this example illustrates, the stories of Australia and our Pacific neighbours are inextricably linked. We would love to learn more about the folklore of the devilfish, so if anyone is aware of a good source that we could check out, please do let us know.
Although the sailing community still holds onto some of these old superstitions, to this day, many of them actually faded into time with the rise of the steam engine-powered vessels. An article in the Armidale Express and New England Advertiser, New South Wales, on the 12th of June 1900 captures this very point. Kate, would you run us through it?
I'm ready to dive in when you are.
Let's go.
Sea superstitions. Not the least of the mighty changes wrought by the advent of steam as a motive of power at sea is the alteration it has made in the superstitious notions current among seamen from the earliest days of seafaring. In the hurry and stress of a steamboatman's life, there is little scope for indulgence of any fancies whatever, and the old sea traditions have mostly died out for a lack of suitable environment. Indeed, a new genius of seafarers has arisen, to whom the name of sailor hardly applies. Oh, God, he's judgy. They themselves scornfully accept the designation of sea navvies, and many instances are on record where, it having been necessary to make sail in heavy weather to aid the lumbering tramp in her struggle to claw off a lee shore, or keep ahead of a following sea, the master has found to his dismay that he had not had a man in his crew capable of tackling such a job. Those millennials, no work ethic.
I haven't got a clue.
Yeah. Perhaps the first old belief to go was that sailing on a Friday was to court certain disaster. I mean, who wants to work hard on a Friday?
I know, right? Friday for a reason.
All old sailors dwell with unholy gusto upon the legend of the ship that was commenced on a Friday, finished on a Friday, named the Friday, commanded by a Captain Friday, I see a pattern here, sailed on a Friday, and founded on the same luckless day with all hands, as a warning to all reckless ship owners and skippers never again to run counter to the eternal decrees ordaining the day upon which the Saviour of the world was crucified, should henceforth accursed or kept holy according to the bent of the considering mind. But steam has changed all that. When a steamer's time for loading or discharging began to be reckoned not in days but in hours, the notion of detaining her in port for a whole day in deference to an idea became too ridiculous for entertainment. It was almost immediately died a natural death. He's so judgy.
I know.
This, of course, had its effect upon less hastily worked sailing vessels. Although there are still to be found in British sailing masters whose ships would use a good deal of artifice to avoid sailing on that day. Among the Spanish, Italian, Austrian and Greek sailing vessels, however, Friday is still held in the most superstitious awe. So he's judgy and racist.
Yes. It's very much through a lens of the 1900s.
On Good Friday, there is always a regular carnival held on board these vessels, the yards being allowed to hang at all sorts of angles, the gear flung dishevelled and loose, while an effigy of Judas is subjected to all the abuse and indignity that the lively imaginations of the seamen can devise. Finally, the effigy is besmeared with tar, a rope attached to it, which is then rove through a block at the main yard arm, and it is set alight. Amid the frantic yells and execrations of the seamen, it is slowly swung aloft to dangle and blaze, while the excited mariners use up their remaining energies in wild dance. Frank T. Bullen in The Spectator.
So I take issue with one of these things here. Makes a good point about the fact that superstitions were wiped out with the steam engines coming in. But look at this. Swung aloft to dangle and blaze. Okay, so this is an effigy, possibly like a sack filled with hay or something, covered in tar, set ablaze, and then they haul it up on the yard arm. Now, is this yard arm wooden?
I thought every good sailor knew that one of the most dangerous things at sea was fire on the ship.
Yeah. So, I mean, this sack filled with whatever and burning with tar all over it, you think might be a bit of a hazard hanging from a ship's yard arm?
Well, it certainly doesn't pass work health and safety muster these days.
So that's what I took out of that whole story, basically.
Sorry, I was just way too busy just like observing his engorged judgment of everything. It's like,
yeah, he tells it as it is, that's for sure.
He does.
Sort of superstitions that were previously tied to something that was no longer observed, like the wind, because it wasn't needed anymore, just died a death with the steam engines that just kept powering through mostly.
You know, that modernity, it just likes to wipe away the superstitions of the past, doesn't it?
I know, it's all the weird and wonderful. Just although that means that the poor fisherman that's trying to make his way from his home to the fishing boat doesn't get waylaid by like a million things that could cause him bad luck. He could just go down and start work. With centuries of sailing tradition behind us, we could go on and on for hours about all the strange and bizarre superstitions of the sea that have sprung up and persisted over time. One of the most notable points we can distill from all of these examples that we've spoken about is that although some superstitions were based on a lack of understanding of natural phenomena and processes, the ocean held, and I think still holds to this day of scientific understanding, a power and mysticism that, within the human mind at least, defies logic, sows fear, and demands respect.
Also, I think it pays to have a lovely little cute black kitty on board.
I think that is one of the best superstitions out there.
Who doesn't want a cute little black cat to cuddle?
Exactly.
Especially when you're going through a storm that you can't whistle away or don't have a tomahawk to cut in half.
Exactly. You need a bit of that feline, purring good luck on your side. The spooky time of year, along with this season of Into the Silent World, may have come to an end. But all that we have explored and learned through the episodes in this season will stay with us, mostly in our nightmares, and inspire us to dig further into lore, myths, and stories in our neck of the woods. Join us in the next season, where we'll be diving into a brand new and exciting topic of people's association with the seas and waterways.
In the meantime, if there is something that has intrigued you from this season and you would like to know more, or to check out our sources, cast your eye over the show notes. We've made them available on our website at silentworldfoundation, one word, .org.au/podcast. We also post related information and shenanigans on our social media platforms, so be sure to give us a like and a follow on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Into the Silent World is a Silent World Foundation podcast. Researched, written, recorded, and edited by Kate Pentecost and Renee Maliaros. A hearty sailing ship-sized thanks goes to the Mutineers, Sydney's leading pirate band, for performing, recording, and editing our Jolly Sailor Tavern theme music remotely and during lockdown, a true feat.
Many salty sea dog thanks to Jay Pentecost and Jay Mullen for lending us their voices this season too. And above all, a most sincere thanks to our listeners who held fast and saw us through this first season. It will only get better from here.
You've been a wonderful crew. One of the animals which was often seen as being helpful to sailors, such as a seagull, a dolphin, or an albatross. I'm pausing for the sound effects.
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm. Good call. Good call.
Yeah.
I could almost hear them. I thought I heard a seagull in my mind. That's really weird.
That's how good my production is. It's already there.
It's already happening. Yep. Mm-hmm. A wave of the hand accompanied it a bit.
Cato then took the decision to tack out of the way, which meant that although the collision with Bridgewater had been avoided.
It was avoided. Gather round, blats, and listen to this tale of the sea. Maybe not so piratey.
I mean, I do love a good pirate.
Yeah.
But it's like...
Okay.
Superstitious sailors.